3, 2, 1. All right. Hey. Hi,
morning.
Greg. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Can you believe where we're sitting? Not where we're sitting, because we've been here before, but the trees and the weather. I mean, winter, folks.
Yeah. Well, the rain pushed us into the cabin this morning. We're about 30 yards from where we normally are here. Episode 5. Let's kick it off officially here. Episode 5. Place and Purpose. Sonoma Mountain. Greg Sarris, Obi Kaufmann. We are nearing, not quite there yet, but nearing the halfway mark in this 12 episode sojourn there and back again around the long calendar loop that is the year.
Well, Obi, the only thing when I hear you say that, don't say that we're almost done, because this has been so much fun. I don't, so don't keep doing that, Obi.
Yeah, we're almost to the midpoint. Yes. It is so much fun. It is such a joy. Thank you again for joining me here this morning, or having me to your mountain. Such a magical place today. Yeah. What I was thinking about, like, what was it, episode 2 in September, where we were sitting there like in the middle of a heat advisory, right? Yeah. And here we are, just a scant 90 days later. And it is cold. I don't think that it's even 40 degrees here. Just a few more degrees. It might, if we were going to get rain tonight, it would probably snow here, right?
Yeah, if we drop a few more degrees. See, we're about just about 2,100 feet. Mm-hmm. And I heard the weather advisory say it could drop down to 25 or 24, which means we could get a dusting of snow. Mm-hmm. It's close enough. Mm-hmm. But my God, you really see through here. That's an amazing how everything has changed. I mean, I've seen it here over the years, but when we started, the rattlesnakes, the lizards, everything was out. They're all hibernating. They've all gone into the rocks.
That's right.
And the only thing that's going to be coming out are the salamanders now.
Right. I was thinking that too as I was walking over the moist duff that is newly saturated this morning. All of the moss on these old grand female bay laurels out here is almost like the phalangia inside of a lung. It's like the moss has risen,
Yes.
inflated. Yes. Because of the return of the moisture, blessed moisture.
Everything's different. It just, water gets on the trees and the moss just blooms. And yeah, it's like they have their own coat. They're wearing a coat almost. And then they strip down in the summer when it's dry. And it's amazing. You don't notice how much moss is on here until water gets on it. I don't notice it much in the summer. Mm-hmm. But it's there, obviously. Mm-hmm.
You were saying about before we started here. You were talking about the perfume of the bay laurel and the flowers, and they're going to be blooming here in a couple of weeks.
A few weeks. They after the first rains, they get a good rain, and I see the buds on the tree. I worry, year after year, with this drought, so many of the trees up here, the older trees and the weaker trees, those that have immunity issues with sudden oak or whatever, they've been dying, Obi, with the drought. They're compromised. They're so we say immunodeficient, and so I worry that these old bays, they're old. They're very, very old. That if they're with little water, how are they going to do? But already with the last rain and now this one, I see they're full of buds, which means we're going to have pepper nuts. But before that, as you mentioned, we're going to have just the trees blooming with these little white flowers full. And they'll bloom from about the end of December until the middle or end of February. And it's amazing because if you get a warm day on one of those days, a couple of warm days, the air up here is just wafting with the sweetest smell. It's like almost like you're in somewhere in Central or South America with the flowers wafting and smelling. It's unbelievable. Yeah, and there's so many of them. And then the bees come out on those days. They say, well, let's get out of the hive. We've got one day, we've got a lot of nectar out there. And it's all the bay nectar.
wouldn't it be wonderful if we could somehow catalog the smell of the season, right? It seems to me our language is so anemic in so many regards. We just don't have. We would need to invent new words to describe the petrichor, right? The smell of the earth after the rain, or it's different. I don't know if it's necessarily more beautiful or not. I don't know how to even begin to gauge the quality, but the smell of the dryness in the summer is a particular perfume as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. In the summer when it's so warm, I almost feel like I can smell the rocks. You smell the earth, and the rocks have a smell. They're just the rocks have a smell.
Well, that certainly is chemical. I mean, there's a volatility there of the minerals.
And then, of course, when it gets very dry in the fall, that's a smell. And then, of course, the spring. So,
I appreciate this indulgence here because I've been searching for what is beautiful and harvesting what is beautiful. I think is a worthwhile thing to do. Completely outside of utility, completely outside of the daily news cycle, just to take these moments in. There is almost this thing that I've been, gosh, Greg, it's like this 24-hour news cycle has instilled in me, and I think across this Generation Z, the young people, to always be facing this ever-present doom, that is by nature of the media itself, right? That's what the profession of journalism espouses to do, is to expose the corrupt, or to expose the unjust, and so that's what you get all the time. And so now there's this familiar this idea, and this is going to lead us into a discussion of I think some of the aspects of storytelling that we can get into, is that you are what you think about, and this is called in social sciences availability heuristics. And that means that the more you think about doom, the more you're exposed to doom, the more
you feel doom.
Right,
That's
exactly.
where you're going.
Isn't that right?
And Obi, I think we were talking the other day on the phone, and you've had your tragedy losing your dear little dog, and I've been going for 20 years with the tribe and everything on too much coffee and et cetera and things like that, and listening too much to the news. And part of me getting healthy is turning off the news, not watching it so much, because doom can become addictive. You need it. And I just find that, part of my getting better is remembering. And as I've turned off the news more, and not that I need it, we all need to know what's going on, but as I've turned off the news more and left my phone down, all of a sudden the land once again gets brighter, more colorful. The birds, I see more birds. I focus on them, the things that I've always loved. And that makes me remember what, again, Mabel McKay said. When the average workday for a California Indian around here was 45 minutes a day. Except, of course, as I've said before, when the salmon are running or you're harvesting the acorns or pepper nuts.
Right.
And I asked her once, well, what did they do the rest of the time? And she goes, we wove baskets and thought about God.
Yeah.
Art and philosophy. You had time to stop and think and watch and be fed, be nurtured. Yeah. We're not nurtured anymore. We're run dry.
Yeah.
And again, here, the trees are a thing here to nurture us.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that idea of the the Indigenous work week being just a few hours.
Yes.
I think that challenges the idea of work. Being alive at all is a process of a dancing relationship between joy and suffering.
Right.
And that is work as well.
Yes.
I guess the work is the actual labor of material harvest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I now that, I've turned this corner in my career about 7 years ago with the publication of my first book, where I am working harder and longer than I ever have. And yet it is the best, most joyful, most engaged process of, labor that I have ever been involved in, working for no one but the process of, and this is more and more as I hang out with you, Greg, the process of remembering and eschewing the process of forgetting and training that muscle of memory. What's the quality? What is the character of the thing that I'm remembering? Being open to, as Mabel said, dreaming about God, right? Yeah. And of course, I don't frame it in that way because that's not my tradition. I was raised by atheist scientists. It's just like, I don't really need that word. But as we've talked about on this show before, like there is this plugging into the spiritual aspect of the place and how that transforms my thinking from the purely corporeal to these themes of what is it's that dual space between what you put it as in one of your characters in one of your books is remembers the stories of the mountain when animals were people and knows nothing has changed.
Exactly. Yes. Well, and that's the whole thing. I mean, the stories that we've told from the mountain, when that ancient time when the animals were still people, they were all doing the very human things. And today we are animals. We are animals that must remember what we were taught. And part of the whole thing in the American Indian cycle here is the inverse of the Judeo-Christian tradition, because in our stories, what happened is one of the animals, the human, was there and got greedy and wanted to pull a trick on Deer Woman. And before he could kill her in his house, she ran out and told everybody, and they grew wings and they grew legs and they ran away. And the one that was left, the dumbest, was the human being. Complete opposite. So we have to spend our life reconnecting with the mistake we made as a result of separation.
As a result of separation, as a result of, I think of, I think of colonization of the North American continent over the past 500 years, and the wholesale industrial extermination, not only of the human populations, upwards of over 50 million people died.
90% of the New World human population died.
That's right. There's a theory now that the genocide was nearly so complete, and the implications of it had ripple effects through the biosphere.
It had to, because we were in relationship with it in a coevolution. And an integral part. I mean, here, for instance, the controlled burning that we did, the harvesting and the pruning of the trees, the clearing along the creeks. All of a sudden, you stop that, and you have new species and things come in. Very quickly, you have, if you don't want to call it a disaster, you have absolute environmental chaos.
You have environmental chaos. That's right. I mean, the fire-dependent peoples across the continent. To such a degree, when the fire stopped, that paleoclimatologists are now thinking that that's what caused the little ice age between 1500 and 1800. That actually anthropogenic carbon emissions dropped so suddenly and sharply that it changed the nature of the atmosphere, which is fascinating. And also, what happened was with the absence of humanity, wildlife populations skyrocketed. So industries were born across the eastern seaboard, namely, but towards California too, where industries were born on the on the corpses of wild animals, where you have over 1 million beaver pelts a week being shipped to France. 1 million a week for years and years.
Think about the Russians.
And then the
here.
Russians. Yeah.
The Russians were here in. They came here in 1812. They left in 1842. Mm-hmm. In 30 years, they depleted, basically almost made extinct the sea otter population.
Yeah.
Because they were getting the pelts, they were using the natives and people they'd brought down from Alaska, indigenous people from Alaska, to hunt and kill those pelts, and they were trading them with China. So just in 30 years, they decimated an integral part, again, of the coast of the here. But I was thinking about something earlier, too, about memory and all these things.
Yeah.
And I always think about this, Obi. Remember, we're moving so fast forward and so much doom, but this is the first generation of the first time in the history of human consciousness where youth is privileged over age. Think how dangerous that is. Because if you're always looking to the new, you can only learn from the past. And if you're not looking back, if you're not remembering, and you're only looking forward, you have no basis from which to understand how you're standing or what you're doing anything. So just think about that. I don't know who's counting 100,000 years of consciousness, 50,000 years of consciousness. And in the last, call it 100 years, 150 years, especially now with media and the youth culture and all that, since the 1950s, essentially.
Yeah.
This is the first time where we're not looking back. It's not cool to be old. It's not cool to look back. It's always new. And of course, that's tied to commercialism and everything else. You sell to youth and you focus on the youth, and death and age and all of that becomes bad. We don't want to hear. So for the first time, you have a culture that is looking forward and not remembering. Think of the consequences of that.
That's a very interesting theory, Greg. I'm not sure. I'm sure that exists on some level. I think it remains to be sort of seen, because I also see a yearning in the youth to forego the commodified paradigm of the natural world that has so informed industrial generations over the past few hundred years, based on as you said, Judeo-Christian ethics of object superiority to the natural world. Say, I think there is a lot of wanting to let go of that and to return, and I wonder, like, I think today we're talking about remembering and forgetting, and we're talking about transformation. Right. Remembering
we're an antidote to that problem.
Okay. I hope so.
I want to be. That's the goal. And I think there are many youth. But what concerns me is generally, and it's spread into Europe and now many other places, again, this youth culture.
Okay.
And I'm not saying all youth, of course.
Right.
I think there are some wonderful, I've known many, I've taught many of them, I've interacted with many young people who are yearning, in fact, to turn that back, to say no to the commodification of nature, the commodification of everything, even of the past.
That's right. Well, there's an epistemology there too. I think there's something scientific about encouraging youth to find truths out for themselves and to not take for granted these ways of being that maybe are untested or untrue. Like, I mean, my mother told me this story. She's a psychologist, and it stuck with me about like how she was. It was over. Okay, so she was talking to her cousin about the way she ties up her turkey to cook the turkey at Thanksgiving, and my mom was like, why do you do it that way? And she said, I don't know. It's how I don't know why I do it this way. It's how my mother did it. Right. So like there so much of our pattern behavior is just what we see in a very monkey do.
What has become normal for
monkey
us?
See, monkey do. What has become normal for us, and questioning that, I think, is good.
And we have to.
What the land remembers. Like I was mentioning the export of beaver. Beaver were everywhere here. In fact, there's a lot of a reason to.
They helped us get across the creeks and rivers. We could walk on top of their. They were our bridges.
It was an aqueous paradise, even
Yeah.
through mega droughts.
Yeah,
and there were
especially during mega droughts.
Especially during mega droughts. I mean, there was. And beaver do so much for the quality of the watershed.
Yeah,
and it was. Just recently, just over the past 30 years, there's been robust debate in the California naturalist community as to whether even beavers existed here at all before then.
I've been privy to some of those debates. Some of the folks up at Occidental Arts and Ecology up there were, they've done some pretty serious research. We know there were beavers; they're in our lore.
Yeah.
So I mean, if they're in our lore, our stories, as much as salmon are.
Yeah.
So, we didn't eat them as much as salmon, but we certainly used some of the pelts and things for coats and things that we wore in the winter. Their hair is prickly, so we didn't use them as blankets. But I know enough, I've heard that, but the skin is thick enough so that when you tan it, you can wear it over your shoulders in this kind of weather.
Right.
Yeah.
50,000 hairs per square inch or whatever it is.
Yeah. We use the rabbits for blankets, rabbit hair, because that's soft and the skin is thin. So
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Now, I want to. So here we are with the gentle trickle, the little drumbeat of rain on this cabana that we're in here, looking at the ring, thinking about how the land has transformed in the past few months, and thinking about what transformation is, especially in terms of our own psychology and our attitude towards the animal spirits. Okay, the animals. Okay, when the stories of the mountain, when animals were people, and knows nothing has changed. Right, this overlap between worlds where two things can exist at the same time. Yeah. And I was struck recently upon rereading and then rereading again a particular story from your 2017 book, which was How a Mountain Was Made, which is different than your most recent book is Becoming Story. Becoming Story is much more of a
personal reflections on my experience in the land in time.
In time.
In my time.
In your time.
Yeah.
In your life.
Yeah.
These stories in this older book of yours, and I think you're kind of working on the sequel now to this one, aren't you? Right.
Yes,
so this is your creative, super historical account of why things are. By way of how things are, right? So, and there's this funny thing that happens with Indian stories. I mean, I'm Coyote Thunder on Instagram, and I get that from Barry Lopez's book, Giving Birth to Thunder, Sleeping with His Daughter. 50 Tribes Collections of Coyote Stories. How Coyote Builds North America. Yeah. So that I've always been fascinated by really the Shakespearean characters that come alive with who you are is defined by what you are.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the stories that I really want to kind of talk to you about here right now is Waterbug Walks Away with Copeland Creek.
It's about water, a big deal.
It's about water, and here we are. I think this is very sort of a timely discussion to have today as the rain comes down, as I myself here, Greg, and as you so generously noted, my dog passed away a couple of weeks ago, taken quickly by the bulldozer.
And folks, it was the cutest, sweetest dog. I don't want to push you, Obi, but
Thank you.
push you into an emotional spot. But I met the dog about 4 or 5 times, and when we first came up here, he trailed the top of the mountain with us.
Yes, he's a great trail dog.
Yeah.
Very strong. The bulldozer that is a brain cancer diagnosis moved through his little body quickly, and here I am in 2 worlds myself.
Yeah.
In a world that is still here in form and space, and yet is so fundamentally altered by the loss that I see everywhere, because he was with me every day, all day, for years and years. And
you're sensing the absence,
and the quality of bereavement that is everywhere. And so here I am searching for transformation in myself into what I may become next. I'm thinking of okay, so our Waterbug walks away with Copeland Creek. So Waterbug is a terrible old man, isn't he? He's just unpleasant.
He's unpleasant. He's unhappy, and he's a lech.
He's a lech. But he's also has great power, isn't he? He's a magician.
Yeah. Oh yeah. As we all are. He has all these qualities.
Okay. Yeah.
But before we go on, isn't it perfect? Now we're going to stories, because this is the time of year. Once it rains and gets like this is the time we start telling stories. It's too cold. We're going to be eating the dried salmon. We're going to be making the acorns that we've gathered. Now is the storytelling time. Here in winter, when it was cold, that's when the storytellers would sit on a log in the dark in front of the kids on the floor or around on the ground and imitate the voices of the characters in the stories and tell the stories.
Oh, yeah.
And as Mabel always used to say, then you can think about them. You listen to them and you think about them and you learn. Of course, and then in the spring, you got to quit thinking and go start living, right? Because you can't be thinking about the stories when you're walking around and step on a rattlesnake or a cougar in the bush waiting for you. So you're paying attention. You've learned from the stories something all winter long. So this would be the start of when we would probably, when it starts getting cold, okay, we've gathered enough acorns, we've dried enough meat. We're going to now have those days of doing nothing but talking and telling stories. So here we are, doing something very old.
I chose this story because of its relationship to, or because of how it models, it frames the concept of water, which is very it's a unique take on what the substance is, the spirit of the substance, the thing itself that we here in California so, I believe, need a fundamental attitude shift towards its utility and its intrinsic value. And I think that we're getting there with some great breakthroughs, like the since we've talked last, the federal regulations for the removal of the 4 dams on the Upper Klamath River have been approved, those hurdles have been overcome, and now the last best hope for salmonid populations in California to remain extant seems like an opportunity on the very near horizon. Right? Getting rid of those dams, freeing the Klamath River, so the river itself can not die. And ultimately, this story, Waterbug Walks Away with Copeland Creek, is a story of potential death of this entity,
water,
that is the creek.
Yes,
right.
Water.
The water.
Well, it goes back to the thing, when you think about it, everything is life, and at the same time, everything is spirit. So that water is life, a body with a spirit, and must be treated and nurtured and respected as such. And it's a very powerful body, because that body, like everything else, but more obviously with that body, I'm talking about water, we are also dependent on it. And you take it away, misuse it, and you're in trouble.
Yes.
As with most other things, but you'll notice it with water right away.
Right.
So that's what happens
in the whole living world.
The whole living world
is dependent on it. You know, from the bears to the salmon. So water bug. When we meet water bug, he's married. He's married to
Eagle.
But she becomes Eagle.
She becomes
Eagle in her moment of liberation.
Yes. I've had enough of you. I'm going to fly into the sky. Right. You know, he's crabby. He's demanding. He's not appreciative. He's misogynistic.
Yes. Right.
And as a result of what she put up with him for enough time, she said, I've had it with you. I'm going to fly. And she became the eagle, flying the highest, seeing the truth from falseness, all of that sort of thing. She's able to see better than anybody else.
Right. And I like that she leaves in Act 1. We see her again in Act 3.
Yes, yeah.
But
she comes back. Yeah.
She comes back.
Yeah, and kind of gets back at him because she knows she's up there. She can see all. Right. And she has seen. Waterbug, yes, he's like all of us. He's clever. Human beings are clever. We have ideas, but we're like children. We're smart, but we're not wise always. Mm-hmm. And if our passions get in the way or overrule us, be they about greed based on insecurity or fear, be they desiring somebody or something, where that's all we can think about, we're clever. We'll figure out a way, but we'll have forgotten in the process the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. And that's just what Waterbug does. He's without a wife. He's kind of short and stubby. He's angry. He's horny. He's horny. His wife has deserted him. And, he notices deer, her lips touching the water. And then he sees Quail, the most beautiful woman of all in those ancient times, come down. And he figures, if I can get that water, they'll all be kissing me. Yes. Now, see, he's so focused on getting a woman and getting someone to kiss him that he forgets how important that water is to everybody else. He gets selfish.
It's interesting you put it that way, because it's not just the water, right? It's the song that the water has.
And if he gets that,
song is like a synonym for power. Almost,
yes, right. And remember, the water won't give him the song.
Right.
The water knows. The water's wise, ancient. Yeah. The water knows. I'm not going to give you my song because I know what you're going to do with it. You're going to misuse it. Right. And then he gets furious and he says, okay, well then I'm going to trap you and put you in a cave and starve you till you give me that song. And which he does. He gets the creek, he dams it up and puts it all in a basket. He puts it all together in a basket and hides it in a cave. And he keeps going back and says, "You're going to give me it yet? You're evaporating. You're dying. Are you going to give me your song yet?" And finally, Water, thinking of everybody else, gives him the song. But before that, before he can destroy, and everything in the meantime is drying up. Right. We're in a drought, a major drought, where the salmon aren't running in the creek. Much of what we see today, and then his ex-wife, we'll call her, now Eagle, sees this with him, this drop of water that he's got, and she grabs him with her talons and brings him up into the sky, and she just wants to drop him. And, he does eventually, the water begins to run again, and he fall off of his...
She says, spit out the song, right?
Yes, he's got the song, which is all that's left of water. Yeah. That's all that's left of water is that spirit of water. Mm-hmm.
And so you can spit it out. It's still the liquid.
It's the liquid.
It transcends its materiality.
And he's scared to death because she's going to drop him. And he spits out the song, and the creek begins to flow, and all of that. But he does fall off the talon and lands. And of course, that's why when you see water bug, they go backwards in the water. There's always an etiological tag, or often an etiological tag at the end of these stories, which is about how the world became the way it did. And so when you see water bug going backwards, if you ask the old people, why does a water bug, everything goes forward, he goes backwards? You remember the story.
You remember the story.
And the moral of the story.
Ah, that's good. Yes, morphological. Like there's something about the. Well, I think more interestingly is like by the creek is where Eagle found her wings.
Yes.
Right. I mean, that happens at the beginning of the story, as we already mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Like, so by the creek, by this avenue of life, like, I mean, there is a sort of like axis mundi, if you will, like the hub at the center of the world that is this creek.
The village, whole this community, ancient first village is on the creek.
This ancient first village,
where all the animals were people.
Right.
They lived on the water, right on the creek.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now there's this the next thing that happens is before Eagle picked up Waterbug was revealed as a liar.
Yeah.
Right. Why would I steal the creek? I didn't do that.
Yeah.
You know? And then he forgets too that he actually had the creek. There was a moment when the creek, when it's just down to one drop left.
Yeah.
It's just so starved that it's down to just one drop hidden in a cave that he sort of forgot it there.
Yeah.
Wrapped up in his own lies, in his own like manner of forgetting, in his own lasciviousness or whatever. Yeah. And then after Eagle finally gets him to spit up the song of the creek, the creek returns, then there's this justice, right?
Yes.
Chief Coyote says we should kill him.
Yeah.
We should kill Waterbug.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, Chief Coyote. Is Coyote the chief in many stories?
Yeah, he's the head man. Yeah,
he's the head man.
Yeah, he's the creator. He started it all, kind of.
I see.
But he's still not a god. Again, remember, the leader is the god. It's not, again, that great chain of being in the Judeo-Christian tradition where you've got God and then the chiefs and then all of the down to the serfs and then down to the, algae.
Right.
Here, the algae could be the wise person. So Coyote is still human, and he doesn't think he's got to listen to other people.
Yeah,
and he said, kill him. But somebody said, I forget who in the story, somebody said, no, don't kill him. We need him to remember.
Water.
Water
was the one who had the mercy.
Yes.
To her captor, his captor.
Yeah, Water said.
I don't think he ever engender Water, but like.
No.
Yeah.
And so Water, told him, no, you need him here to remember, to protect me.
If we kill him,
we'll forget.
Yeah. He is here because his place is now the story that we need to tell about our own arrogance, our own forgetfulness, our own greed. Isn't that what this story is about?
The story is absolutely about greed and about self-interest and the danger of self-interest versus thinking of the community first, thinking community versus self. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, again, just imagine, Obi, if they had followed Coyote and killed him, we would have forgot Waterbug and then forgot the story, and in turn forgot how important it is or what can happen if we're greedy and don't respect and take care of the water.
There's a lot to overcome. There's a lot to unpack there. At this point, I would really love to, if anybody out there in the podcastosphere who wants to go ahead and enter their questions, if they have any questions for Greg and I, we can talk about water. We can talk about
water bugs.
We can talk about water bugs. We can talk about animals. We can talk about anything.
Yeah.
We can talk about winter. We can talk about where we are right now. I'm ready to receive your questions here. So get those into us. And if you're not inspired to do so right now, if we maybe planted a seed in you that sprouts later in the month at any time, you can go right to like Instagram is a good one. Go to Place and Purpose Live, I think is what it is, and at Place and Purpose Live, and just like comment on whatever, and we will answer your questions in the next episode. We really love participation, so please don't be shy. As we since I last saw you, Greg, I gave the keynote at the Sandhill Crane festival in Lodi, and I talk about beautiful birds. Going back to the beginning of this conversation with Doom, Sandhill crane populations are rebounding, and across the Central Valley now there are thousands of sandhill crane dancing, preening, snorking, cackling like they do. And I think too about European traditions of animal spirits, and the scientific name for the sandhill crane is Antigone canadensis. And Antigone, there's two Antigones, right? There's the Antigone from Homer, which would be I'm sorry, not Homer. Ovid's Metamorphosis, of course, right? So Ovid was writing about characters from the Trojan War, which was a couple of thousand years before Ovid in Republican Rome was writing his classic tale of transformation, metamorphosis, right? Where Antigone was transformed into a crane, as opposed to Antigone from Sophocles, which
Indigenous people here didn't have a corner on transformation, shapeshifters.
Yeah, that's right.
Or animals being people, people being animals.
Yeah. I think the best, most contemporary treatment of Ovid's Metamorphosis in literature is Richard Powers' The Overstory, which I think is just such a beautiful book where we're talking a lot about Ariadne, who I think is she's no relation to Antigone in Ovid's book, but another character who transforms into a tree, and that transformation, that thinking like a tree, as a tree, being a tree, is a way of remembering, and something that I believe we have access to on whatever psychological level. I am wondering always, Greg, about what is happening now that we are changing paradigms, that the train track, we're switching tracks, is what I mean to say. Like something is happening. An awakening of conservation seems to be happening, although we are this deleterious movement from, we've lost 60% of the world's wildlife in the past 50 years. Okay. So if you're looking at like the quantity of biomass that is living animals has just wild animals.
A little more than 60%. Yeah.
A little bit more than 60%. That's right. While at the same time, I talked to my mother yesterday, and I mean this by way of, anecdotal evidence, I suppose, but my mom called me. She lives in Truckee, and she's like, yesterday, she called me, and just 5 minutes ago, I saw a family of 6 coyote playing outside the kitchen window. And they all looked healthy with because now in the winter they get their plush fur, their winter coats going, and they're all well fed, and it seems to me a miracle that we're now in 21st century California not destroying every vertebral mammal that we see. Every large mammal with a backbone is just fodder for our weapons,
so that our cows can eat and the sheep can graze. Yes.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Which is a myth in itself, right, about the nature of predators. Right. So And it is anecdotes like that I do find hope and that keep me going. That I see coming up here today. I saw over 100 turkey on my way up the mountain today. Over 100 turkey. I've never seen flocks of
deer
it.
here earlier.
So many deer.
And I kept saying,
dozens of deer.
Hurry up, Obi! I want you to see this. But you know what I'm thinking. What I often think, Obi, I think we're going through a rebirth. Call it a birth. And birth is painful. In many ways, it's ugly. It's blood, but it's about transformation and continuance. And rather than see it as all doom, because nature will survive, let's both psychically, spiritually see ourselves as part of a birth. A new birth, as you said, a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift, another way to think about that, is a birth of something new.
Yeah.
And so let's think of ourselves as part of this birth and birthing process and be helpful in it. Let's go there.
Let's go there. That's very good.
Yeah.
So we got some questions coming in.
Okay.
Christopher wants us to talk about seasonal changes at Tole Lake.
Oh, okay. Well, again, Tole Lake, that was once again, and it still is to some extent. You know, Christopher, the remarkable thing about Tole Lake is that that's at least a landscape where a lot of the brush and underbrush hasn't grown. It's still, and a lot of people that go there, I mean, and people that love the redwoods or the bigger forests think it's kind of boring because it's those barren kind of hill grassland rolling hills out there. And which it always was. And that was huge herds of elk and pronghorn and deer.
So it's an ephemeral lake at the base of at the southern end of Sonoma Mountain, between east of Petaluma and west
with
of
the
Napa.
view of the entire area from the top of the hills there and those huge rocks.
Gathering place of the Pomo for millennia.
Oh,
right?
for Pomo and Cosmiwalk forever. It was our Stanford Medical Center. A remarkable place. More charm stones found in the bottom of that lake when it was drained, dynamited. It was a shallow lake always, but dynamited, than almost anywhere else here in the New World. And charm stones, rocks found that we know aren't native to here. They're rocks that came from Mexico and Canada, which confirms that doctors and training medicine people were going back and forth. Yes, indeed. Our Stanford Medical Center.
Yeah.
And so what Christopher, at the time before the yellow grasses were there, it was all bunch grass, of course. And so you didn't have the yellow rolling hills. You had more greenish, or in the fall when it got a little dry, grayish hills. So now you have, the dryness out there, but certainly the replenishing now with the water, Christopher. And it's our dream, our tribe's dream, to once again fill that lake and help restore what was there. The birds, the geese and ducks and the flyway that use that lake, and all of the flora that was once around the lake. So,
is there a plan to do that? Is it? In the
yes,
works? Oh,
yes.
Okay.
We're having some problem. I'll just put this
on
here because there's one of the ranchers on one end of the lake is, he's first of all, he doesn't like that we've made it a park because he doesn't want people.
That's right. It's a regional park.
It's a regional park and that's the first model, the tribe's co-management model with the county. We have a co-management signed agreement with the county. 50-50. Everything that goes on there is in a relationship and determined between us and the county of Sonoma. We use that same model for our national model down in Point Reyes National Seashore. We have a 50-50 agreement there with the national government to co-manage. But in any event, back to the question, Christopher, there's changes of course, in the colors and now the grasses and all the things that will come out as a result of the water. And it'll be amazing to see.
Indeed. Okay, so we got Morgan asking if we can give examples of a traditional story that focuses on plants or mushrooms.
Plants or mushrooms. I can't think of one with mushrooms, but one of the things that, there are a lot of stories that have to do with trees, and we had a lot of stories like with clover. There's a story about how the clover bloomed, and this is kind of a good one. We used to eat. There were many different types of clover that are now extant here. They're not here anymore.
Extinct.
Extinct, yes. Extant is living.
Right.
That I wish there were more extant ones.
Right.
But there were lots of clovers, and we ate clover. It was one of our major foods. And they said that many times when things got dry around the lakes and things, the clover would grow. But there was a time when the clover didn't bloom. And we didn't know when to eat it then. And so we didn't know what to do. So we talked to the bees and some of the insects, and the insects had an idea. They had a song that made other flowers bloom, so they sang that song to the clover so it would bloom. And then, of course, there becomes that interdependency between the insects and the bees and the hummingbirds and clover and us. So that's the bees and the hummingbirds knew that song, and they helped us know how the clover to bloom, and then also reproduce and be able to feed us. Clover was one of the major foods, greens that we ate.
There's this emphasis, isn't there, on cataloging in order to remember.
Yeah.
The diversity of plant life in general. But this is why we remember. We have to account for everyone.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way the story is complete. And that's the only way that's if we forget someone, then our ability to thrive suffers. Doesn't it?
Every story that I've heard, the Indian stories and the good stories and the helpful stories of our life here on Earth, constantly remind us that somebody else did something with and for us. We as a species now do everything alone. Like we don't think of anybody else. We think we have the power to fix things and change things, but we don't realize that in our thinking that we're connected to everything else. The story I just told about the clover showed how we were dependent on insects and hummingbirds just so that the clover would bloom, and the clover was dependent on them too. So that in everything you see, there's cycles and interconnection.
There's this coyote-like posture that modernity seems to encapsulate. That it's a technical problem. And I guess I'm talking about coyote-like posture. I'm talking like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. Like we can figure out a machine that can trick water, for example, into being more abundant.
Yeah.
Like despite the billboards you might see on I-5, it is not building more dams does not mean more water. Yeah. This is so there's technical solutions that only go so far.
There are water bug solutions.
There are water bug solutions. That's right. So we have another question here. Jillian would like to know more about how Native peoples use peppernuts.
Ah, yes. Well, I don't know if that's coffee in there.
It is coffee.
Okay. Yes. Julian, peppernuts were really important. And I've eaten them. So I watched my aunts when I was younger up on the reservation. So what we do is we take the peppernuts, we husk them and dry them. And then when they're really dry, we ground them into a powder and then make little balls, peppernut balls we call them, and bake them in now a regular oven, but they used to bake them in a fire. And they taste amazing. Not only are they nutritious, Julian, but they have a lot of caffeine in them. So that was our call. You'd eat it, and they taste like a very rich, almost rich, bitter, dark chocolate. They have a almost chocolatey taste when they're baked. And we used to eat those, and so we used to laugh, and we'd say, okay, and of course, it was perfect. we'd eat them and stay up all night. Even my aunt's in her kitchen up on the res. We'd eat them and stay up all night telling stories because we were wide awake.
That's great. That's great. Well, that idea that, the water bug solution is embedded in this idea that no one can do everything.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's interconnection here everywhere. Remembering the nature of that interconnection leads to transformations that are necessary.
And health.
Right.
For all of us. So go back and we think about
transformation would be adaptations.
Yeah, but transformation is painful. It's birth. It's continuation. Mm-hmm. And so things are going to be difficult. They're going to be painful. It's not going to be a pill we can take, Obi. We have to do it.
Yeah. Here we are, episode 5. Won't see you again until after the new year when we do this.
That's right.
I can't remember when I went up to the California Naturalist Conference recently, and I was honored and asked to help facilitate the closing statements there for what is a really robust program, the California Naturalist Program. And I had the honor of meeting, among other people, this great podcaster named Michelle Fulner, and her podcast is called Golden State Naturalist. And I think today, December 1st, is my interview with her is going live too. So I promised I'd give her a shout out here for that.
Yeah.
Really appreciative of all the great work. She has a wonderful catalog of water bug solutions, if you will. Interconnected solutions designed to disintegrate our proclivity towards greediness.
Yeah.
And if that's not a good message for the holiday season, I don't know what is.
Yeah, a reminder. The holiday is simple reminder of family, not just a family, but what we must do in our daily lives, in our lives throughout the year, to make sure that we enhance and maintain and protect our family, our relatives, and the larger family, which is the world, in everything we do. We can't have it just be a box. Okay, it's not just going to be going to church on Sunday. It's going to be living church.
Very good, Greg. All right. Thank you again, my friend, for joining me here.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And Obi, it's always so much fun. You know what? When I'm with Obi, this could go on. We need peppernut balls. We need a lot of. We could keep going forever, Obi.
Let's do it. Okay. All right. Until next time, thank you for those of us at Place and Purpose.
Thank you.
Thank you.